travel back in time to the 80s, reliving the music.
Everybody have fun tonight. Everybody Wang Chung tonight.
The movies.
Yes! 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 Oh! Oh! Oh!
I'll have what she's having.
And the parties.
No one in my family ever drinks.
That's great. You probably never run out of ice your whole life.
Because just like you, we're stuck in the 80s.
Sure, it's not 1985 right now, but who knows what tomorrow will bring.
I did my best, but I guess my best wasn't good.
Jesus. Spearsy, are you crying?
No.
It sure sounds like you are. James Ingram comes on and you melt like a pair of wax lips on the 4th of July.
It's just so sad.
What, this song?
No, what Karen does to Gary at the end of Last American Virgin.
Oh, Lord. Are you watching that again?
Well, it just turned 40 years old, and I really haven't had a good cry since the second episode of Season 3 of Star Trek Discovery.
Oh, look, nerd. I can't help you there. You realize we're sponsored by the 80s cruise, not the Star Trek cruise, right?
Well, can't we have both?
No. No, sir, we cannot. Would it help if I could get you someone to talk this whole thing through with?
No, no one can help.
Not even Diane Franklin?
Seriously? You can get her on the show?
Make it so.
I know what boys like. I know what guys want. I know what boys like. I got what boys like. I know what boys like.
Hey, welcome to Stuck in the 80s. It's your old pal Spearsy.
And Brad in L.A.
And today, as promised, we have an amazing chat with an actress who played some of the most beloved roles in the 80s.
And one of the most loathsome roles.
It's our interview with Diane Franklin.
No, you've been a true friend. I can't think of anyone who would have done what you've done for me.
Stuck in the 80s is most definitely not sponsored by the Star Trek cruise. Don't get me wrong, I like Star Trek. I'll watch me some original series anytime.
Captain's Log Supplemental.
And Steve adores Star Trek and would gladly go on the Star Trek cruise if it weren't the very week before. The 80s Cruise! Yes, our true North Star. Join us in 2023 for a week-long trip back to our beloved decade above the Royal Caribbean, Navigator of the Seas. Performers will include Devo, Bret Michaels, Kim Wilde, The Church, Howard Jones, Living Colour, Jodie Watley, The Smithereens with guest vocalist Marshall Crenshaw, Vixen, Cutting Crew, Midyear, Autograph, Tone Loc, and more. And first-time guests can get $200 of cabin credit just by using the promo code STUCK when booking. Just head on over to www.the80screws.com in the internet browser of your choosing for more information.
Now, live long and prosper.
Again, wrong cruise.
www.StarTrekTheCruise.com.
Stop it. What are you doing? Are you on drugs?
What about the drugs? What about the drugs? They're in the kitchen.
The Last American Virgin, released in July of 1982, a full month before Fast Times at Ridgemont High came out. So I don't want to hear any conspiracy theories, Brad.
I'm okay with the lack of conspiracy theories in my life. Yes, thank you.
I think safe to say if it was 82, we would have been 15.
Yeah.
So did you see it in the theater? I don't believe I did.
No. This was a HBO Cinemax special.
God bless HBO.
And it was very special. Very special indeed. I'm all tingly.
Well, yeah, and I there's a moment during my interview with Diane Franklin where I tell her that she basically dragged a generation of guys into puberty, which she takes quite well.
I can't believe you did that. I mean, just because it's true doesn't mean we need to talk about it with her.
She seems very, very comfortable with the formal role and the informal role that movie played in a lot of people's lives.
Yeah, which is cool. It's nice to see people, embracing the work that they did. And we talk about this from time to time, how musicians really they're with their creations all the time. They're touring those songs. they play them in their encores, but for a lot of actors and actresses, they do that work, and it's been, in this case, literally 40 years ago, and they're just completely separate from it.
Yeah. No, not her. She embraces it. I was curious to see what critics thought of it at the time, so I looked it up on Rotten Tomatoes. Last American Virgin has a 77% fresh rating, which seems...
That's surprisingly high.
Yeah. Fast Times at Ridgemont High only has a 78% fresh rating. Just
okay. Huh.
And I would say, I mean, these are two very different movies, despite coming out within a month of each other and both having a lot of the same themes.
Yeah. I mean, they come at it a little differently.
Yeah. One reviewer called it, quote, a barely tolerable, raunchy, formulaic teen comedy that turns unfashionably serious with a realistic downbeat ending, unquote.
Wow. Reviewer.
Nailed it.
I feel like you crushed it there. Yeah, exactly.
When was the last time you saw it? Did you watch it this week?
I tried to, but I had trouble chasing down a watchable version.
It's not streaming anywhere.
It isn't anywhere streaming, and yes, I know, gentle listeners, you might also think, oh, someone's probably posted it on YouTube. Somebody has, but the rip is terrible, and it's really blocky, and it freezes up every 20 seconds. So, if that's how you want to watch your movies, knock yourself out.
So it's funny, I was going to watch it the other night. The wife had agreed that, for the interest of research, we needed to rewatch it again. And I know I have it on DVD, so I pull out the case, I go downstairs. It's Sunday night, which is always a good night for an 80s
sob fest
or whatever fest it is. And I open up the DVD case, boing, it's not there. So
no.
Finding a uncased DVD in the Spears lair is no easy task.
Somebody bogarted the Last American Virgin.
Yeah, but what we did though is we found on Amazon there was a 6-movie pack, and I think it had Losing It, Last American Virgin, Zapped.
Wow.
Oh, The Sure Thing. I forget what, Valley Girl, and something else. But it was a pretty good lineup.
That's a pretty decent. I mean, for what those movies are, that's a pretty good package. I mean, just for Zapped and Valley Girl, and Last American Virgin. I mean, there you go.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to. I think that's supposed to arrive today, actually. So who knows what will happen tonight?
Delightful. Cue the James Ingram.
I think it's a double feature. I think it's going to be Last American Virgin and then Zapped, or maybe I reverse the order. I don't know.
No, I do it in that order because Zapped has a more upbeat ending.
Yes.
Then you'll sleep better.
That's true. I sleep horrible these days.
Barney still has his powers. Spoiler.
Anyway, so Brad and I have been talking about this movie for a couple days now, and it's funny how you think that this movie has some unique themes. Losing your virginity, at least for guys, was a popular theme in 80s movies. If you want to count them up, Losing It, Private Lessons, My Tutor, Class, Weird Science, Zapped, Risky Business, Porky's, all cover that.
Yeah, all circulate part of the plot around that particular feat.
If you want to go with girls losing their virginity, Little Darlings, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, 16 Candles.
Yeah, it's funny because we were also talking about movies that have like downbeat endings, and I had a real hard time coming up with other examples, but Little Darlings came to mind.
It's been so long that I've seen it, I don't know that I remember how it ends.
Well, if I remember correctly, one says she lost her virginity, but she didn't. And she's, it was wonderful. And the girl who did lose her virginity was like, it was awful. And she says she didn't.
Oh.
So it's like this crisscross at the end. Like, maybe this isn't everything you've been thinking it would be.
I don't know. Boy, movies with sad endings in the 80s. I didn't.
Well, I mean, Sophie's Choice.
Well, like teen movies.
Okay, teen movies. Yeah, I'm like, you come up with some sad endings.
Yeah.
But yeah, teen movies with down endings. And not, they're trying to sell tickets. They want us to have a good time.
Right.
In Footloose, Ren doesn't get the crap beaten out of him by the redneck boys in the pickup truck. No, he kicks their butt, doesn't even have any dust on his tux when he's finished.
The one thing that Diane and I talk about, we talk about how Last American Virgin is 2 movies in one. and we talk about how it's a little bit more maybe realistic than other teen movies at the time. And she talks about how the fact that this is a movie that was based on an Israeli movie called Lemon Popsicle, was it?
I believe that's correct, yes.
Which was...
And it's directed by the guy who wrote and directed the original
right,
as well.
And
right?
that is based on his actual life. So what when I think about, when I go back and I think about this movie, and when I watch it again, it is definitely two movies. There is the raunchy teen comedy where you have guys measuring their own units, in gym class. Like you had time for that.
Yeah, and oh yeah, this is a plate of cocaine. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I just keep it in the kitchen along with the flour and the sweet and low.
But it's also this amazing love story that ends in a very sad but totally realistic ending. Because let's face it, most love stories, until you get married and you meet your soulmate, it's like Tom Cruise says in Cocktail, all relationships end badly, otherwise they wouldn't end.
Yeah, there's something to that.
Yeah. I think that what's also interesting is that you have a female lead character, Karen, played by Diane Franklin, who was neither a hero nor a villain, but sort of a pawn of sorts who gravitates to whomever seems to like her most. And it's an unusual character, I think, at that time. Everyone seemed to have a more established agenda. Her character does not.
Yeah. Did you ever date somebody just because they expressed interest in you? I know I can think of at least one girl that I dated that I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, sure, let's go out.
Yeah, no, I did.
No, that didn't really work out. Okay.
There was someone who liked me in high school, and I invited her to a dance. And then we went on a date, and there was like no chemistry whatsoever.
Yeah.
And I remember I tried to weasel out of the dance. And I told her that I was grounded or something. Like I had done something horrible and I was grounded. And
my mom caught me digging a hole in the backyard with a shovel.
So I told the girl, so we can't go to the dance. So I feel like I'm out of it, right? And hour later, my mom comes in. This girl has had her mom call my mom to get me off the hook because they'd spent X number of dollars on the dress.
You're like, I figured it all out this time. Oh, wait, no, I didn't.
Yeah, because my mom's like, what? You're not grounded. What are you talking about? And I'm like, oh, geez. I remember it to this day. Like, I can't believe I've
caught in the pinchers. Oh, what? Parents talk to each other?
Yeah,
that's obviously, clearly the secret weapon that parents of teenagers have is that teenagers don't realize that parents talk to each other.
Yeah. So most people by now probably have seen this movie. If you haven't, like I said, it's going to be a challenge. You're going to have to probably buy the DVD or maybe you can rent it. But Diane came on the show to talk about the 40th anniversary of the movie. We talk about her other roles, what she was doing before that movie hit, what she did afterwards. We do spend some time on Better Off Dead. We talk about what she's doing today. It is a long conversation. She is a great conversationalist. And it felt more like two people chatting over beers than it did an interview.
When it's over, Brad and I will talk a little bit more about the movie's soundtrack. And we'll have some quick seggies and the usual other delights. But sit back for now and enjoy this conversation with Diane Franklin.
Diane Franklin, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. I love anything having to do with the 80s. That makes me happy. I love 80s podcasts.
That's funny because I love seeing photos of you on social media. You really get into the spirit when you interact with 80s fans at cons and conventions, and you really embrace those roles that we remember so much.
One of the things is I personally love nostalgia, and I feel like it takes people back in time. And like you could have a really horrible day and all of a sudden you see a photo of something and you go, wow, like that just takes me back. Like I have no problems. It's gone. So so sometimes, I'll look for really obscure things, or I'll find something, I don't know, I'll just try different things. And so I appreciate you saying that because at a certain point I thought, well, is this just getting, I don't know. I just didn't know if people would be that interested anymore. But I think people even more so, are interested. And the younger people are very interested, which is amazing. It's just so exciting. That people are looking back and then they're going, oh, like I want to go back in time and, oh, I've seen her in this, or, the great thing, the lucky thing I have in my career is that I've been able to do a lot of different kind of genres. So I can reach a lot of different people. I've done comedy, drama, TV, film, teen films, horror, just a wide range of things. I've had, and a lot of people really didn't know about my career when it was actually happening. So it's very exciting now for me to be able to take the time, because I wouldn't have had the time when I was younger to connect with people. I would have been working. I would have been getting ready to audition for something. So now I have the time to focus on people and say thank you. So
I wonder if that's the reason. I noticed that a lot of the actors from that decade, for the longest time, they kind of were resistant to talking about it, or they turned their back on those movies. But lately they seem to be coming around, and there's more and more memoirs from actors about those days.
I'm hoping that I've been a part of that, because actually when I started doing conventions and when it was so fascinating. I think I was one of the first people to do all these conventions and meeting people, because in the entertainment business, conventions were always seen as the graveyard. Like that's where you go right before it's over, right? And I never saw it that way. And the first convention I ever was given the opportunity to go to, I was so excited to see all these actors that I grew up with. So to me, it was like, oh, wow, this is awesome. Like I can sign autographs for other people, but I can then now see people that I grew up with, which to me, honestly, is the feeling I get when I do that, like see people from the past, is more than money could buy. It's more than going to a great restaurant. Like how many times do you go out to eat, but then how often do you meet someone that you perhaps were role modeling or, had a crush on, or, those feelings, they just take you back. So what happened was I started going to these conventions. I'm going to say now, could be 20 years ago.
Wow.
All right. And I started going and by the way, it was weird. It's weird to go to a place and somebody wants your autograph. And you meet a stranger. I mean, the starting of it is very strange, but then once you have the experience and you meet people, it's a beautiful experience. So what was interesting was I started to do these conventions, and then I started telling people, my friends who are actors and actresses, you should go and do these, because you have no idea like how happy it makes people. And I think it's one of the things we can do as actors to give back, because we've always been on the other side of the screen. We've never known how we affected people. And the stories I hear and the things that people bring me are beautiful and life-changing and affect me as well. In answer to your question, yes, other actors are starting to do it more. They're trusting it. And then what happened, honestly, was conventions became a moneymaker. And then all of a sudden, all the studios wanted to have a spot at a convention. And obviously Comic-Con was huge and created a mass, like almost a mass hysteria of people wanting to go to conventions. But then when COVID hit, everything pulled back again. So it's really starting to kind of ramp up again, and people are a little still hesitant. But all I can tell you is I've been to a whole bunch of conventions, and I am not casual about COVID. So I've worn masks and been, you take them on and off, and I've been vaccinated. I feel like a dog. I've gotten my shots, So I think for me, yeah, I mean, it's been a positive thing and very exciting I think it's just good for me, good for you,
Well, when you do the accents. Yeah, no, I went to my first con a couple of months ago here in Orlando, where I live.
Your first con? Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And we got tickets to get photos with Ralph Macchio and Billy Zabka together. And then Nathan Fillion, because I'm a huge Castle and Firefly fan. But the line to get in and get your tickets, I mean, we think we stood there for 3 hours and we finally gave up. It was a madhouse. There must have been 160,000 people there.
Yeah, and you have to watch your conventions. Honestly, I think the best ones are the small ones because you get more time with the person and they're more intimate. When they get huge, it's out of control. I mean, lines around the block for one person. And also by the time you see the actor or the person, they're so exhausted and they all can be like, they sign really fast, take a picture and it's gone. So you've been waiting for 3 hours and then you get like, less than a minute because it's so hard. I mean, for me, I've been very fortunate because I don't know, just I get people, I get a constant stream, but I don't have those huge lines, which, obviously are money makers for the people involved, but I can see why the actors are, who are that big, get tired.
Yeah. So when you're doing those, I mean, people come up in character. I'm guessing that Monique is probably the most popular thing for people to dress up for when they see you, right?
You know what? Well, as far as people coming up, people have asked me, and I've even asked fans and people who are interested in the 80s, like, what do you think I'll be remembered as? Like, Better Off Dead, or Amityville, even people come up to me about that. I mean, TerrorVision. I mean, it is such an unusual thing. I have a very wide range, and Better Off Dead, Bill and Ted's. Like, so there are people that just know me from one thing, and that's it. So, although I love, when I asked this to my fans, it kind of went 50-50 with Virgin and Last American Virgin. If you don't know the film, The Last American Virgin, and Better Off Dead. But then there are people who are horror people, and I am Amityville all the way, Amityville 2. So I'm kind of, I feel like, obviously people will see you as they first saw you. Like the first thing they saw you in is who you are.
Yeah.
And so some people hate me because they know me as Karen.
We're gonna get into that. I swear we're getting into that.
They hate me. And then other people like, oh, she's a Bill and Ted princess. Forget it. She's a babe. Like it's a whole.
Yeah. You say that people are attracted to the first role they remember you. And for me, I mean, it's obviously Karen from The Last American Virgin. I mean, and I've had issues with that over the years because for the longest time, you and Karen are synonymous. And I don't think that there's a character in 80s film that I have ever been as angry about as Karen. So,
yeah, no, I'm glad you said that because it is a big responsibility to play Karen, especially now that Karen is a name too. All Karens.
Oh, I didn't think about that. Jeez.
Stay away from the Karen. So Virgin, Last American Virgin was a film that I didn't even know if it was going to get made. I mean, when I got the audition, I had no idea that, I mean, at that time in the early 80s, you didn't know if a film was going to get even on the screen. That was not a given. There was no internet. I mean, so it took so much for a film to get made. But when I did the part, I remember saying to myself, well, I can bring some sweetness and I wanted to bring Karen to make her not like predictable. I didn't want her to be the girl you saw and went, oh yeah, well, I don't even want her with him anyway. So when I saw the film in the last few years, I was like, whoa, you do not see this coming.
Oh,
you want Karen to be with him. And that's why it hits so hard. And I remember, all of us, Lawrence Moneson, Steve Anton, and Kimmy Robertson, we all thought that Boaz was going to change the ending. We really thought that was an unfair, it just wasn't American ending. It wasn't a happy ending. We really just thought it was something we thought, oh, this little film, it's not going to matter that they change the ending. They're going to change it, right? And Boaz was adamant. No, this is not what it is. This is my life. I live this way, and this happened to me, so I cannot change it. And just like that. And and I had to then figure out how am I going to justify this? And I really I've talked to people about it. I mean, I've said I would not have taken. I wouldn't have gone with Rick, and I certainly wouldn't have gone with Rick after he got me pregnant. I wouldn't have gone back to him personally. But But I did want to say that my reaction at the end of the film, a lot of people read a lot of things into it, and I like that. I think that's good. I think that if it's ambiguous, it makes it more interesting. And my feeling is, I just think that sometimes relationships, even if you love someone, even if you deeply love someone, they cannot be. That's just life. You can love someone with all your heart, and there's something that's keeping you guys from being together. And I think that for me was what was going on there. I think that my character, Karen, if you took us today, like if we grew up and I stayed with Rick, I think it would have been it's like girls who stay with, addictive bad relationships. They get hurt or cheated on or something, and they keep thinking, oh, they didn't mean it. And that's also with Amityville. Even the brother relationship, which we can get into later, but it's also like, that person didn't mean it. No, this is not happening. This is not real. So from my perspective, I played it very real and sincere, but I know that everybody hated me. It was just terrible.
It's funny because as you're describing it, I'm thinking about it, and I'm thinking, I just don't think that when I saw that movie, I was probably 15 years old, maybe. And I don't think I was ready for something so realistic. Like I was like 3 years removed from the Muppet movie, and
yeah.
And now
it rocks your world. It rocks. I mean, and I have had so many guys tell me that they like it was on late at night and they saw it when they were 12. And I'm like, yeah, a movie like that will change your life. Like that's the movie you remember. Like you go, oh man, I'm not going to let that happen to me, or I'm not going to be that guy, or I didn't even know all this stuff happened, Yeah. And then also frankly, for me, playing Karen, and I had the nudity in it, and I think it really taught a lot of guys a lot of things, really. I really think it's like the sex education for guys. I mean, I've always said that, and it's true. Like guys learned, they didn't know even maybe what a woman looked like, or naked, or they or how to treat a woman. Like it's one thing to see a girl like just naked, but another thing to see a love scene. Yeah. That's a different.
No,
I think that's what all those 80s movies I thought taught.
Everyone that I've told that, hey, you can't believe who I'm going to talk to next week. I'm going to talk to Diane Franklin. They're like, oh, they're like, tell her that she's the one who forced me into puberty. And I'm like, oh, come on. I'm not telling her that. It's just like, I'm like, oh, come on, guys. But you're right. I mean,
yeah, no, it's true. And I mean,
the way it was.
At that time, I couldn't have talked about it like this, but now I go, no. It's like, where you're going to learn, your parents are going to tell you, show you, it's, you're going to learn. And the thing about Virgin, I've always found really amazing. And this is why people, I think, still watch it today. Like, okay, if you told me at that time, people are going to watch this film today, I would have said, how is that even real? How is that possible?
Right.
But for so many reasons, it's a human story. It never goes away. Whether it's today or 100 years from now, humans will be acting the same. They will have the same problems and same dilemma, and it will connect. Obviously, the ending will never go. It'll never go away because it's not candy, cookie cutter. So that's another thing. It's a time capsule for the 80s, which is great. So if you don't know anything about the 80s, all of a sudden you're smack in the world of a teenager during that time. In the darker world, I mean, in a world, let's say, more realistic. Like I look at Fast Times sometimes and I go, I loved Fast Times, but that was very American in a way. Like it was
comic book almost.
Yeah, it was cute. Like it's cute to be an American, but this was a little bit more, it was more real, gritty, and like, it was the part of like, I think teenagers, the exploring, like, what if I did this? And that's why when you watch it, it's like you get to explore the parts of life that maybe you were thinking about, or maybe, you're curious about. I mean, like everything from the crabs and the whole, the prostitute and the whole thing. It's like, yeah, like don't think people don't explore or think about those things or want those experiences. And if you get that heads up on it, you're like, oh, like I'm sure so many guys were like aware of crabs, from that movie if they had not even heard about it, right?
Yeah.
But the other thing I wanted to say was that people will watch that movie, young guys will watch it, and what I love about it is that movie lures you in with the sex. Okay. So like you hear it's a teen sex movie and you're thinking, oh yeah, this is like this is going to be fun and make titillating. And, it's like, we're going to have a great time watching this. And then they learn about love. And if you have not, if you had sold the movie that it was like a love story gone wrong, no guy would have seen it. So I think it's one of the smartest films because I don't think I've ever seen, I remember that distinctly it was two different tones, but I think it's so smart that Boaz was able to create the story where it brought guys in, but then they learned something and they may not have ever learned. Yeah.
Did he share that vision with you, with the cast at all? Did he kind of say, here's what I'm trying to do with this movie? I'm trying to tell two stories.
Oh, no. I think this was Boaz's life. So I think it kind of how he saw life. I think Boaz, as far as I could see, first of all, Boaz is a very sweet, deep, but also very humble person. And I think when he wrote this story, it was based on his life. Obviously, this is a movie that's a remake, for those of you who don't know, of another film called Lemon Popsicle. And that was made, took place in the 1950s. Last American Virgin takes place in the 1980s. And the other thing I wanted to say was that, so this actually happened to Boaz. So all the things that happened with the crabs and the prostitute and all that, he experienced that. So I think there's a part of him that goes, boys will be boys, and this is what life is like. But then there's a place which gets serious. And I think I don't think he did, it wasn't an intellectual thing. It was an emotional thing. I think he connected to the story emotionally, and that's why it works for us as an audience.
Did you ever get the impression, did you ever hear from him after the movie came out? Was he happy that was he happy with the final result? Did it express, did he find it cathartic in any way?
I've only heard positive things. I don't know if I asked him personally, but at the last screening, I did see his daughter. She came to the screening because Boaz couldn't. And it was a screening at American Cinematique. And Lawrence Monison and I were there to answer questions, Q&A. And so his daughter came, and that meant so much to Lawrence and I. Because that meant that the film still means something to him, and he would have loved to have come, but I think he was afraid with the COVID going on that's not a good idea. But his daughter came, and she was lovely. And it's amazing to see in her eyes how much this film has affected her family. And by the way, Boaz directed it and wrote it, but his wife, Ruia, she edited it. So it was very family film. It was a very connected film. It meant a lot, I think, to that family. And it was his first American film, maybe. I'm not sure, but after that, he moved on to other things. And I know that there were plans to make sequels, because in Lemon Popsicle in Israel, there were many sequels. I don't even know how many, like 8 or so. I have no idea. But with us, Last American Virgin, that was the only one. And I don't know why. Maybe it was because in maybe Israel, maybe they're a little bit freer with those teen films, maybe the nudity or the subject matter. But here, maybe it was big, but it wasn't. Maybe had resistance from people to show it in theaters. I don't know. Because it definitely pushes people's buttons. Some people just left the theater in the middle of it because it tackles, issues like abortion, and it tackles, there's cocaine and reference to cocaine, and there's drinking. But this main thing about this film is that teenagers act like adults. You don't barely see the parents, and that the kids have to make adult decisions. And again, that brings us back to a feeling of when you're a kid and something happens to you, do you tell your parents or do you take it on? And during the 80s and the early 80s, kids took it on. they took it on. It's your problem. You're not going to get rescued. You're not going to do it. You have to deal with it. You'd go to your friends or whatever. That it was a different world. So I think that's another thing that might be shocking to people who see it today.
Yeah.
You know?
I agree with what you were saying earlier too, about how when you see your character in it and it plays out, it's not what she does isn't quite as telegraphed as teen movies you see today. I mean, I read in your book that you describe your role as having no center, no self, no identity, but rather you gravitate to whoever is nicer in the moment, like a feather in the wind.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I read that and then went back and saw the movie that I'm like, that's exactly what your character is doing. And it's just it was so, I think, unusual for us to see something so realistic and not predictable.
And how many girls are like this? I mean, for me, there are so many girls who are very young and they don't know who they are yet. They only know who they are based on the people who are around them. So if somebody likes them, then they gravitate to them. I mean, and this could even be friends. You can have a friend, like somebody like you, and suddenly you're like, oh, I'm their friend. And you bring out a certain part of your personality so that you can, relate to them, but that might not be who you are. I actually have an interesting thing happening right now. I have students I teach, and I have I teach acting to kids, and I do right now I'm doing, I usually teach, I can teach K through 8th. This particular program right now I'm doing is 3 to 8th. And I also teach professional actors one-on-one. And I had all kinds of teaching. I do improv and scene study and voice work and all this stuff. So dialects too. But I have this one girl, and she has friends. She is a 6th grader. Or 7th grader. This is the height of socialization in middle school, 7th grade. I mean, 8th grade is you're just right there. Like, your friends are the most important at that age. And she and her friends are very tight, and they talk all the time, and they're very close. And one girl is very talented, but she loses herself in her friends completely. Like, when her friends are around, she completely loses her identity, and she becomes just one of those girls, and she actually stops being her own person. And then there was this other girl, she is doesn't have a sense of who she is yet. So she's the one who latches on. She's like the third person in the wheel. But the second girl is fascinating, because this is a girl that I didn't see her identity until I started teaching her. And then she was able to say no to her friends. Like, she's going to do her own thing. Like, she was able to hang out with them, but then she would be like, no, I'm going to go do this thing. Or, I saw her become her own person. And I went, wow, there's an example of, where Karen is she just goes from person to person. There's a time in life where, whether you're younger or older, you have to decide if it's your life or if you're going to just follow other people in their life. And I felt like Karen she never had her own center. She had a friend, and she was popular almost by default. She's pretty, in the sense, she was just a reflection of everything. And she's like, oh, okay, fine, whatever. Her friend Rose is, Rose has more of a sense of herself, to me. So more identity. But Karen was more like, if you like me, okay, I'll just go to you, and whoever's in front of me, whoever wants me the most. But I mean, the other thing too about it came from, her thing comes from insecurity, not from ego. And I think a lot of times people think really pretty girls are into their ego, but when you have a strong ego, it means you're very insecure. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, that translates. Like, if somebody's like, oh, well, I'm all that, they're massively insecure. Because if someone's really secure, they don't need to go, oh, look at that, right? Right. So
the one thing about this movie that I'll always remember is it will forever ruin the song "Just Once" by James Ingram for me.
Right? Oh, yes.
But
my gosh. They said that so many times in the movie. I didn't even realize it until I just recently saw it, and I went, and the audience even went, oh my gosh. I mean,
you hear you hear the piano, and you're like, oh shit.
Right.
Oh, that's to this day.
Thank you for mentioning that. That's funny.
Well, even when I did the, I think when I did the breakup podcast one time on Stuck in A's, I think we either started with it or ended with that song or both, because it is iconic for its appearance in that movie. I mean, it's an amazing soundtrack. I mean, just start to finish, but my God, I mean, you say that song and everybody goes Last American Virgin.
Yeah. Like you hear it on the radio. Absolutely. It is interesting. That's the other thing too. That film was the first film that used popular teen music as a soundtrack. It wasn't a thing. It was the first. And we were so lucky. I mean, Boaz, I don't even know how we did. It was so lucky to get all those musicians because it wasn't, normal, usual. After that, everybody started, saying, okay, let's find our favorite band and, pay them and see if we could do it. But it was brilliant. I think it helped everyone, it really was a brilliant idea. It was helped a lot of artists, and so made me very happy that now if I hear music like that, I go, oh, there it is. There's the song. Yeah. What's happening now? Or, I know what boys like. I know, like
I think since You're Gone by the Cars, Better Luck Next Time by Oingo Boingo.
Right.
There's these little messages that are sprinkled in there. And I remember even at the time, I'm like, I don't even know who these musicians are. It's only when I went back, 20 years afterwards, and when I was like, oh my God, that's Oingo Boingo. Holy crap. All these bands I just had never been exposed to at that point in my life. So contrast Karen. It's like exam for your chemistry exam at NYU.
Right.
Contrast Karen with Monique from Better Off Dead. I mean, this is almost like the evolution of Karen. This is like the better version, like what you were talking about before. Someone who is confident in her individuality.
Thank you so much for noticing that, because that was a very big thought in my head at the time as an actress, because it was before I did Virgin, I was cast in a soap opera as a bad girl. And like, I was the girl who was influencing the good girl and getting her to hide her birth control pills in her shoes. And it was like a whole thing. And I never understood why they hired me as a bad girl, because I was a good girl. I was always like a good girl. And that's like, I know, like, that was just kind of my thing. Like, I remember, meaning like I didn't do drugs or I just was more innocent that way. Like, it wasn't judgmental. It was just like, I just wasn't that. So, but I kept getting cast as the bad girl. So I was like, what's up with that? And then with Karen, I was like, what is up with this? Why? And I realized later that people were trying to find a way to cast me, but it was because I was, like they saw me as being pretty. I'm not even going to say, I never really saw myself as pretty, but they did. And because of that, at the time, casting would always try to go, oh, well, we can't make the pretty, we have to push her to the pretty girl, and then we're going to have to make her the bad girl, And I was like, I didn't understand that emotionally. So I always felt like that wasn't who I was, like center, but whatever, you want to get roles, you play all these different characters. And I am very committed. And I played an evil girl, an evil babysitter in a movie called Summer Girl. I mean, now that I'm thinking about it, a lot of bad girls were like, wait a minute. And
weren't you were almost the bad girl in Better Off Dead, because weren't you originally up for the part of Beth?
Yes. Originally Savage wanted me. He looked at me for the role of Beth because he saw in Last American Virgin. And so now I get that. I go, oh, wow. Now I see what you were seeing, that you saw me as the pretty girl, the nice girl who would have dumped Lane. So, but when I went into that audition, I came in so strong as Monique, so strong. Like that is the fact that you even brought this up. I came in there because I bonded with Monique emotionally. And so he was shocked. I think they were all shocked that I would want to play this character, that I could play it. So I remember Savage really struggling. He was like, we got to make you really super adorable. Like, let's try a lisp, so talk like this. I don't know. I'm like, I think he was just trying to change the image of Karen. And I was like, so we cut my hair and the whole thing, so, but when you're talking about the evolution of the character, yeah, I mean, look, Karen in the early 80s, girls were seen as objects, objectified. And I'm talking, this was before Molly Ringwald, before she came out. There was even like Jennifer Jason Leigh, we were, that character in Fast Times, or even Phoebe Cates, like she was an object of desire, and Phoebe actually played an interesting, because she was like more the American girl of like, yeah, I'm hot, but I'm tougher that way. Like, I don't care, but women were not looked at. There was always like, they were pretty and like looked at that first, and then, oh yeah, you're smart, that kind of a feeling. It was just different. And by the time I got to Better Off Dead in the mid 80s, all the John Hughes films came out where we now had a centered female character. Like she was the main role of those films. That was the first time girls had with Molly Ringwald. What I think was exceptional about her career was John Hughes gave her the opportunity to be the focal person in the story. We got to know her. We got to know her emotions. We got to see that she's a full human being. And we'd never, ever, it was almost like she was like John Cusack in Better Off Dead. Like she was the poor girl. Oh, you feel bad for her, But when I wound up doing Better Off Dead, I was like, wow, I finally get to play a character that is a girl role model. And there weren't a lot out there, there were strong girls, but what I liked about Monique is that she won your heart by just being, she was a likable character, and she was capable. She's capable. She could fix a car and do things and and move and ski. She was athletic, and I really like that. And I think I was very proud to be able to say, oh, wow, like I could tell kids, go watch that film. You will, that will be something, you'll look upon in the future. Maybe you go, oh yeah, I want to be somebody who's capable. And guys have told me they loved Monique because they were looking for a girl like her because she could do a lot of things. Yeah. And that's fun.
Savage Steve Holland had such a unique way of doing films. His films stand above everything else. I mean, there's a stamp that he puts on them. I'm kind of curious what he was like to work with as a director. I mean, did you get a feel for what he was trying to do? Because I mean, I got to admit, at times when you were filming that movie, you had to think, I don't know what the heck he's trying to do here.
I trusted him. I knew. You know why? Because Savage has a great heart. And I knew, like, John probably had another image of what was going to happen, but I was like, no, this guy gets it. He gets the core of what makes Better Off Dead great is that there's a part of Savage that it's like, I'm going to say like gets the core of America in the sense of wholesomeness. He values, I think there was kind of a 1950s part of Savage, like that. There's a center that is very wholesome, and he can be really, he's really smart and and can do jokes off things. He gets it. But at his core, there's a wholesomeness, and that's really, it's just part of who he is. And I knew it the minute I met him. I mean, I was telling someone about this. When I first met Savage, I came for my audition for Better Off Dead, and I was in the lobby, and I was like, needed some water, and I saw this guy in the hallway, and like I said, oh, can you grab me some water? You know, or do you have like, you know, do you know anybody can get, I'm about to go into a meeting. Is there any water you can get? And he's like, oh yeah, sure. And he got me some water. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. And this beaming young guy, like looking like an intern. And I'm like, thank you so much. And yeah, I'm about to go into this meeting with this director. Have you heard about somebody named Savage Steve Holland? And it was Savage Steve Holland. And he said, that's me. And I went, like, oh my God. I'm like, well, guess I'm not going to get this job. I say, very good, but thank you. Very nice to meet you. Yeah, blew it. Totally blew it. Just asked the director to give me some water. I have no idea what this is going to lead to. But yeah, it was so, he's unassuming, you know, that's the thing. The minute I saw him. So while we were shooting this film, the things that I definitely knew were different than any other film I had experienced was, one, he laughed while we were working. Like, he laughed at when things were good, we got feedback. So that meant we knew we were doing well. And he also, he enjoyed the process so much because it was his first film. Whereas obviously directors who direct a lot they're just working against the clock. I mean, they have to, like, we got to move here, we got to move there. So it's hard for them to enjoy it as it's happening. And so you don't get a lot of feedback. You go, okay, we're doing the next scene, and, you know, I'll give you time to prepare, and, you know, maybe make some suggestions. But he actually enjoyed every minute. So I knew that the film was going to be great. And you know what? Even if somebody didn't like it, it still was great. It was so funny to us, to all of us who did it. We really had a great time doing it, but also enjoyed what he did. And so to this day, like, I mean, when fans love it, I go, thank you for getting it. So thank you for, you know, having room in your heart to get it, because you can't have a closed off heart if you love this film. Like, you have a big heart. End of story. End of story.
I've always felt a connection to this movie because in the summer of '86, I was working at a video rental store, and it was a small one, and I was the only guy there, and we had 2 copies of Back to the Future and 2 copies of Better Off Dead. And the copies of Back to the Future were always checked out. Like, you could never get it. Later on, I found out it's because the pizza place down in the same strip mall had a copy of it permanently in exchange for that we got free pizza. But that's a whole other story. So people would come in and they'd be like, do you have Back to the Future? I'm like, no, we don't. I said, but take this movie. And I gave him Better Off Dead. And I'm like, if you don't like it, you don't have to pay for it. And I never had anybody come in and say, I don't like it, I don't want to pay for it. Everybody just was like, loved it. You know, what else can I rent? You know, and then,
yeah.
Have you seen Last American Virgin?
Well, now you hate me, right? Well, I guess you will throw it at me when you're done with that.
Well, I mean,
I always tell people, watch Last American Virgin first, then watch Better Off Dead, because it'll be fine. You'll forgive me, hopefully.
Well, I mean, Savage must have enjoyed working with you, because I mean, didn't he want to bring you back for One Crazy Summer? Then you did come back for How I Got Into College.
Yes. Well, with One Crazy Summer, we did shoot a scene. I was really, it was so sweet that he asked me to come. And basically, it was the end of the movie, and I was walking by with another guy and waving to John Cusack.
Oh, nice.
I was like, hi, right? And John was like, what? So that was the end, but he had to cut. Savage had to cut, but he always regretted that. He was like, I wish I could have kept that in, but they had to cut for time. And so then he asked me to come for How I Got Into College. And again, I thought this role was hilarious. I had to play a mom, and I looked like I was
21
17,
years old,
21,
maybe.
Yes, 20.
Yeah.
I'll give it that. I'll get definitely. let's go to 20. Let's get over 18. So I'm not a child bride. Yeah. Wow, was that a funny part? I'm trying to like unload the main character to a college because I want him out of the house. I just
need the room.
Yeah. And we need the room. And it was at the time when that wasn't more common. It was the beginning of that kind of attitude of like, oh, please just let him leave. We can't keep this. Please take this kid to college, because I need the space, So yeah, I again loved working with him. Love working with Savage. He's great. And speaking of that, that's what was amazing about this new book that I have, because I told Savage I decided to write a Better Off Dead tribute book. And for those who don't know, first of all, you go see the film first, then get the book, because then it'll make all sense to you. But I wrote it because there were never any special features in making this book. And I mentioned to Savage, I said, I'm going to write this book. And I actually mentioned to all the cast, like I said, I'm going to write this book. And I was like, I didn't know if people would be into it, or if they didn't, you just don't know. I mean, you do a film and you don't know how other people feel about it. And everyone was excited, but Savage was blown away. Like, he was like, I have been waiting for this moment. Please let me send you stuff. He sent me so much. And am so grateful because this Better Off Dead book is called The Excellent Comedy of the Last American French Exchange, Babe of the 80s. Just look up Diane Franklin book, okay? And it also says it's the tribute, Better Off Dead tribute book. So you can look that up as well. But this book is in my heart. Loved writing it, loved meeting people. I interviewed, Curtis Armstrong. I have an interview, a live interview. I mean, I haven't released it. It's not something I took information from it, but even for me to have been able to ask him questions, go back in time and do that was phenomenal. So maybe at some point, if he was into it, I would release it, but just some amazing interviews.
Yeah. How does he feel? I mean, I know, I think everyone pretty much knows, anyone who really follows the 80s knows that Cusack has never really embraced Better Off Dead, but I'm just kind of curious about the rest of the cast. I mean, how does Curtis feel about it?
Curtis loves the film. He loves it. He might, I don't know how he's actually, no, he's never been exhausted about talking about it. He's always been grateful to the fans. He has a book out and he's got a chapter on it. So he loved it and he loved working on it. And he even, when I read his book, there were things I didn't know. Like I had forgotten, we had a meeting, a reading, and he said, oh yeah, we all jumped into John Cusack's convertible or something. And we drove to this restaurant to eat. And I don't even remember that. Like, I was like, okay. And he's like, I was sitting next, these girls, Beth and, Monique. And so I'm glad he wrote that, because I was like, oh yeah, I don't remember that, because there's so many things. But he loves it. Beth, Amanda Wyss, loves it. Like, I even talked to her about it in a heartbeat. We would do, all three of us certainly would do if you brought it back, like Monique and Beth and, Charles DeMar grown up, we would be there in a heartbeat, because it's just so delicious and so fun.
Yeah.
And then Aaron Dozier he was so excited about this book. He also loved the film. Damian Slade, who played the paperboy, loved it. Like, I mean, he's grown up, but still, I mean, he's the paperboy. So
yeah. No,
he's iconic.
God, I would love to see a movie like this. I mean, it's sort of been the trend now for the last 10 or 12 years to either do a reboot or a sequel to some of the 80s classics. And Better Off Dead seems like pretty ripe material for bringing some of those characters back and just having some fun with them. Would you be open to a project like that?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I've talked to Savage about it a little bit. I don't know where he's at. He wants to do one, and I don't know if it's where he's at with it. I have to talk to him, but certainly, absolutely, in a heartbeat. Yeah. Like, how fun. And my feeling, like, I mean, at a certain point, I would even write a script, because I've been doing so much writing. I've not that I'm a writer. I would certainly have, other writers look at my work, but certainly just to get it done, because I mean, honestly, at a certain point, everyone's busy. So it's who's going to do it? The person who cares, right?
Yeah.
So
it'd be great to bring it back on a streaming service, kind of like they did with Cobra Kai. Just kind of imagine it in a different format. It doesn't have to be a movie. It could just be even a limited series would just be a fun thing to do.
With Monique and Beth and all our kids.
Yeah.
Being down the K-12, right? Like, just super fun.
You sell yourself short as a writer. I just rolled through your book. I mean, it answers so many of the questions that fans would have of everything you've been in. I mean, you really address it all. I mean, it's hard to, when you read that, come up with questions that you haven't already covered.
Thank you. I mean, I certainly, when I write from a perspective of what I would want to read and what I would want to know, and how even the way I set the book up, I wanted it to be where, for me, like, I like a book that I can go to any chapter and start reading. Like, I don't want to have to read from the beginning and the preface and know, okay. So I found that if you do it that way, people will go back and read things if they are interested. So I tried to do a chapter on every character, just because I think we all have someone we identify with, right? Like, oh, I'm the Beth, or I'm the Charles DeMar, I'm the Ricky, who am I? And the characters that are in Better Off Dead, you might say somebody's a bad guy, but even bad guys have their reasons and so it's kind of interesting. When I wrote it, I'm not going to define people's just, this is the jerk and this is that, but we do in life. We have in the past generation used to do that very quickly. Oh, that's the jerk, and that's the nerd, and we did that, and we identified. But today's generation, they don't do that. So when I did it, I was like, well, I know I'm writing to the older generation, but also I'm not ignoring the new generation, because honestly, we don't want to have that negative head. So I was trying to be careful in how I wrote, not for anything more than just respect.
Yeah,
just be respectful.
When you were talking about the character Roy Stalin, you called him something. I think of him as the villain of the movie, but you called him something much nicer. I don't know if it was, you called him a ski bum or something, and it took me like 90 seconds to realize, who is she talking about? And then I'm like, oh, Roy Stalin, of course.
Right.
So
yeah,
weird.
No, because again, like you say, villain, and we are so used to in stories, good guy and bad guy, but that's that's put in our brain. Remember, we all have and actually, it's actually more of like an American way of thinking. Americans have good guys and bad guys. European is like full circle. The good can be the bad and the bad can be the good. So it's kind of just a different head.
You could sort of see in some ways American theater evolving in that direction, though. When you watch some of the series now that people binge, I think the characters are a little bit more.
They have definitely.
Even when you look at a series like The West Wing or something like that, like an iconic series. I mean, all the characters, there were no true villains or angelic heroes. I mean, everyone had their faults.
And that took a while to happen since the 80s. It wasn't the original way things were written. I think it was perhaps originally it was economic, because it was easier to go, well, nobody wants to be this, so everyone wants to be this. And so we're going to sell this to these people, like who want to be the good guys and the heroes. It was easier. I think it was based on that. But then what I'll say is that today, I mean, it's wonderful. Like it makes all like the superheroes, even the character, Marvel characters, whatever all the different characters are much more human. And because of that, I look at it and say, all right, like you could say some people are just born, bad, but then there's also so many people who are obviously nurtured bad. And so you have to look at a person and say, how is this person seeing the world? And when you see how the person sees the world, then you start to understand, okay, well, maybe they need either, I'm not saying you tolerate bad behavior, but you start understanding that we're all the same. It's all how we're treated, and it's also how we take in information. So I will say this, I think it's really fascinating is as a writer, one of the things I've learned is that you might think, you might write a character, and even like with Better Off Dead, all these characters, a lot of people you cannot change. As an example, Ricky. You cannot change Ricky. Ricky, the poor guy, was raised by a pushy mom. That's all he knows. And unless he went outside of his comfort zone to learn how other people are, it's like all he can do is he roles model off what he was raised with. So it's kind of fascinating when you think about, like, everybody's been raised in a certain way, but how many times have you looked outside your own way you've been raised to see how other people have, and maybe what they learned that you didn't, or they were given that you didn't, and then perhaps change some things. But that's a book. That's a whole story. That's another movie.
I know you're still a hardworking actress today, and it seems like you get to work with your daughter a lot, who became a filmmaker. I'm just kind of curious, what projects are coming up for you that we can look forward to?
Oh, thank you for asking. So, okay, first of all, because you mentioned my daughter, something funny. She does a podcast which is on YouTube now, and it's called Sid, SYD, and Olivia Talk Shit. Okay, that's her. So much for that motherly thing. That's the podcast, and she asked me to be on it recently, and the episode hasn't aired yet, so it's in season 2, and so I'm I was just really happy that I got to be on her show. That was just like one thing that she's doing. And Sid is Sydney Heller. That's her comedy partner. And I recently was just thinking, I mean, I've done all this acting, and then Olivia started to do comedy, and she connected with her comedy partner in high school. And I thought, wow, like they are on track. Like they've done series together, like on the internet. They're famous on TikTok. They're under Sid and Olivia. They're really, really, really working hard, and they're spending a lot of time together. And I thought, wow, like just having the opportunity to be on this show it's like a moment in time. Like she could jump to a series, and it could all change in a flash. So I was really grateful to be on the episode. It was like, oh, I get to work with my daughter. You just never know.
Did she ask any questions you didn't see coming, or?
Well, it was the episode has to do with astrology. And so I'm giving her some astrology thoughts, which is kind of funny. Like I sort of doing predictions and that. So it's kind of funny. My background is I always take it with a grain of salt, but my mom used to do charts. So I know, like I was raised kind of knowing about that. So it's just a very fun episode and it's pretty cool. I was giving that to her. But so I did that. And then I also did a lovely short film, which is now, I think, being submitted to film festivals all across the country. And it is called Falling Up. And I saw the screening with Olivia. She came and she was like, oh, Mom, this was really like great role. Like you did a beautiful job. So I'm really proud of it. It's really a cool movie. So I mean, whenever something comes up, I usually post it on my Instagram or my Facebook or Twitter, so people can find out what's going on. And then I'm supposed to do another movie in November in England. And it's fascinating. It's like horror, but it's spooky. So I like that.
Yeah.
So,
what attracts you to the horror movie genre? I mean, because that is kind of I think I told you via
tell
email,
you.
I don't watch your horror movies because I'm so susceptible to nightmares, period. Like,
yeah, I completely get that. Here's what it is. I like horror because for me, that's where the drama is. To me, like, you do a cop show or something, that's a lot of exposition. Like, I saw him on Tuesday and we were in the, I was down the hall, like in, room 217 when he came in with a, knife and it's a lot of exposition. To me, the horror films are where you get real good emotion. And so certainly for now in my career, even though I did Amityville 2 when I was younger, first of all, that's just a rite of passage as an actor. I just feel like as an actor, it's so exciting and so good to do a horror film because you start understanding filmmaking a lot because you see special effects makeup, how the music affects it. It's really, and the tone and the feeling on the set that the director sets up is very different, very specific. And you get a lot of room in a horror film to act. There's a lot of, you've got time where it's not like, let's get it done. Because you're not waiting for the light, right? Losing the light. It's 3:00 in the morning and you're shooting, but still. But I really like horror because, again, for me now as an adult actress, in my later years, that's where the drama is. Like that's where the heavy roles are. And I mean, I did Amityville Murders in 2017. I think I did that, and or 18. Maybe it came out in 18. And I was blown away. I got to play Louise DeFeo, who was actually, sadly, I'm sad that I even had to do this in the sense that it happened, obviously, that she passed away because of the real life murders. But what a gift it is to be able to play someone, because that's, I get to pay tribute to the person. So, yeah, that's why I like horror that way. I'm not into the horror where like you saw me decapitated and my head goes flying and blood comes out of my nose and, claws rip into my face, that's not my style. So I don't do those films, but I like spooky, scary, suspenseful horror.
Yeah.
So that makes me, I think it's kind of more exciting, right?
Still not going to watch it because I remember the last time when I watched that John Cusack did about some hotel room. It took me like 4 days before my dreams returned to normal.
No, just watch Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures instead. Just skip the whole thing. Yeah.
I just showed that to my wife for the first time last week, and I'm like, I don't know what you're going to think, because when you first see it, it's a little off, but she loved it. She thought it was fantastic.
Oh, that's not. Yeah, again, like, boy, look, think about every film may not hit with each generation. You know, it's some things hit, some things don't. What I really like about Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures is that they can show it in high school. You know, like you're in that, you know, when the days where, like, you know, okay, the substitute teacher's here, we're going to show a film, and all the kids are like, yes, we can do nothing today. And they're like, okay, we're going to watch Bill and Ted's, like, yay, you know? So to me, I'm so glad that film exists, because kids can have a great day. And then they do a paper on Last American Virgin in college. That's how they take it.
You would have been great if you had been cast as Joan of Arc, which I know is what you were. Yeah. I'm just saying, I can totally picture you as Mozart's wife and Amadeus too. I mean,
thank you.
2 roles that I wish you'd gotten, but
it would have been amazing to do the role of Costanza. But it's funny. I mean, it would have been a totally different take, but it would have been amazing. And I do have my audition tapes, so at some point.
You gotta put them online.
Yeah. At some point. Online. Oh my gosh, they're so incredible. Just what an experience. Just to have that, just to be, those of you who don't know, like, I auditioned for Mozart, Amadeus, the movie Amadeus, and the Oscar-winning movie, which won like the most Oscars of ever, as the role of Costanza, Mozart's wife. And boy, what an amazing audition process, what an amazing film. And I got to work with Milos Forman many days. Like, we worked so many days. So it was great to meet him and Saul Zaentz. So amazing. Yeah.
That leads me into our traditional final question here at Stuck in the 80s. We like to think of our podcast as a time machine. And I can give you a seat on the podcast time machine to go back to one day or one event, to witness it or change it. So theoretically, you could go back, you could use this seat to go back and change it so that you get this part of Mozart's wife. But I'll leave it up to you. What time or event would you go back and watch or change with the podcast time machine?
Okay, I have it. I figured it out. Okay, are you ready for this? So although I would love to go back in time and get that role as Mozart's wife, I would never have met my husband. I probably would never have done Better Off Dead, and I would never have had my kids. So I have to let that go, because I would have loved to do it as an actress, but in the big picture, my life is so much more fun and so much more. It's much more fun. I don't know. I can tell you, it wasn't maybe a list, but boy, it had a great life. So that's first. But are we ready for this one?
Lay it on me.
Okay. What would I change? I would like to have been in, and I know this is weird, Bill and Ted Face the Music as the wife. And why that one and not Bogus? Because that one would have been such a thrill for fans. And my daughter Olivia auditioned to play my daughter. And imagine if that had happened. If I was brought back and she was brought back as Keanu and I's daughter, that would have been an amazing wink, wink, nod, nod to all the fans. Like, it just would have been phenomenal. So I'll trade that story. And thank you for asking that question, because that I hadn't thought about it until just this second. And I went, of course. And Kim and I have actually talked about this, Kimberly Cates, who played the other princess. And we were like, why didn't that happen? And so there you go. It's happened now through you. Thank you.
Well, I can't take all the credit. The podcast time machine does all the miracles on its own. Diane, thank you for this wonderful conversation. 17 years in the making since we started this show.
but I couldn't think of a better occasion to do it for the 40th anniversary of Last American Virgin. I hope everyone gets a chance to go and watch it again and see it now that they've had your added perspective to it. I think they'll see an amazing movie that stands the test of time.
Just to let you know, if you do love Virgin, my second book is called The Excellent Curls of the Last American French Exchange, Babe of the 80s. That book focuses on Virgin. So that is the special feature that maybe, if you see the movie and you want more information, it's got things that's never been seen before. And it's been out for a while, but that film is like when you're ready and you watch it and you want more, that's the book. So Excellent Curls is the one to get. So
excellent.
All right, there you go. There's a little 40th anniversary surprise there. So
thank you so much for your time. This has been amazing.
Thank you, Steve. A pleasure. To be on the show.
There we go. Diane Franklin. What do you think, Brad?
Oh man, that was fantastic. Like you say, it's just like you're hanging out on the couch, having a drink and chatting about 80s movies, which is, pretty much what we call a Thursday around here.
I liked her answer for the podcast time machine.
Yeah, that was interesting. And I totally respect that. Like, I don't want to mess with the space-time continuum too much.
Yeah. No, I get it. But it does make you think, because when you read her book, she talks a lot about that audition for Amadeus.
Yeah.
And when you think back to that movie, which I know fairly well, and you plug her face into it, it works. If she would have been great.
Absolutely.
But that's the way it goes. And
I will say, I'm sorry. No, Jane Wiedlin is Joan of Arc. That's just how it is.
She would have been good. I'm just telling you.
And I, if you see the video, I happen to see the video that Steve shared with me. I love the fact that her phone case is a cassette tape.
I didn't notice that.
You can see that when she texts her husband.
Yeah, for those who don't know, we do have the entire video of this interview, and we'll post it eventually on YouTube. The other thing I think that stands out, and even she mentions it, this is a movie that had a very distinct soundtrack.
Yeah. I will say, when she says it's the first movie to use popular teen music, the Beatles might have something to say to you about that. But I do think that this is one of those points where Golan and Globus were kind of first movers in the market to a certain extent, not unlike when we talked about Breakin'. So they've come in and they've licensed all this music that, maybe not everyone has quite caught on with yet. So you got some Police, you got a couple of Cars songs, you got Human League. There's an Oingo Boingo song in there that I've never heard before.
Better Luck Next Time.
Yeah. Whip It is in the soundtrack. There's a U2 song, which is pretty early for U2. Journey, Blondie. There's a lot of really good music in this movie.
Yeah. My criticism would be that, unlike a John Hughes movie where the soundtrack really is or feels more organic as part of the movie, I feel like in Last American Virgin it feels a little less fluid.
I would agree with that. And the other thing I'll mention, if you take the time to see this movie, you could almost watch it with the audio off just to see the 80s fashion.
Yeah.
Like, it's a little exaggerated. That's okay. But, come on. Gary going to deliver pizzas in his sleeveless T-shirt with the bandana around his neck. Like, oh my gosh, it's just note perfect.
Nobody wants to see you or I dressed like that.
If that guy rolls up to my house with a pizza, I'm locking the door. Something extra anchovies? Get out of here, kid.
It's got some cringy moments in it, like any sex comedy that's 40 years old has.
Sure.
But, and the use of drugs is probably made me uncomfortable then. It still does today.
Well, you know what makes me uncomfortable, Steve?
The Seggies.
Prepare to qualify.
It's time for Stuck in the Arcade. You didn't think this was going to happen.
I know. I thought it was dead. I come not to praise Stuck in the Arcade, but to bury him. But I'll put the shovel away.
It wasn't. It was only mostly dead.
Yeah. Oh, and you know so much.
We asked people a few episodes ago if you really want this arcade Seggy to stick around, email us. And I think we were hoping for 10 emails. I think we got probably 20 or 30. So I think we're going to keep it.
Yeah, we'll hang on to it. Fine.
make us
talk
talk
last time
about...
I try and suggest a change around here. Jeez.
Anyway, you know how this one works. We didn't actually have a challenge that episode. The challenge was to email us, which you did. So we will play a snippet of a arcade machine from the 80s. If you get it right, you're entered into the drawing for a postal-friendly bottle opener. You know what? I might throw in a copy of Diane's book, too, this time.
Nice. Just to welcome it back to the Seggy family.
Oh, sure. And then plus, I read it, and I read it on Kindle like in 2 days. I just roared through it. It was just...
Yeah.
It answers every question you want answered.
Nice.
So pay attention. Here's this week's Mystery Arcade Sound. If you know it, email us at podcast@sit80s.com. Too much sweet and low. And tune in a few weeks to find out if you're a winner.
Please tell me now. Please tell me now.
Hey, it's time for Please Tell Me Now. This is the Seggy where if you have a question for us, you know what to do. Just send us an email at 3 a.m.
Put PPTMN in the subject line.
Yeah.
And we'll ignore it until we're desperate for material. No, that's not true. We'd love getting these because it's a good chance to talk about something else.
Half the time I forget that it's a Seggy and I just answer the question and reply back to them. And then I'm like, oh shit, wasn't supposed to do that. Yeah, anyway. So this week the question comes from Paul in South Dakota. Do you want to read it?
Nothing would please me more, Stephen Q. Spears. Hey gang, it's Paul in South Dakota. First, I say ditch the stuck in the arcade. It was a cool idea, but it's run its course. Read the room, Paul, okay? Read the room. Now that I have your attention, please tell me now. I'd love to hear where some of the former Stuck in the 80s co-hosts and frequent guests are now. For example, there was one lady who called during the first 100 episodes or so. She always had really good stuff, like some weird New Year's Eve party MTV thing from New York. Whatever happened to her? And other frequent guests you've had on the show. Thanks, Paul in South Dakota.
I think he's talking about 6.
Yeah, I remember 6 from my early days as a listener. Back before I made the show.
I don't remember. So I guess she was a listener who started... I think back then we had a line that a phone number you could call and leave a voicemail message. And so she used to call and leave these really long voicemails in a real heavy Northeastern accent. I don't want to specify that it was necessarily New York or Jersey or whatever, because I have no linguistic abilities to be able to tell you, regionally where she came from. But
all Steve knows is you talk funny.
Yeah. But and so she would pop in from time to time and tell us stories. I think maybe we had her live a few times.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I don't remember the exact circumstances, but I remember her calling in, and actually I remember that New Year's Eve party story.
Yeah. So what happened with her was it's been like 10 years at least.
10?
15?
Longer.
Maybe 15 years?
I mean, I've almost been on the show for 10 years.
Oh, no, you have been, because almost, yeah, for sure. So 6 got mad at us for some reason that has been long forgotten by myself and had just pretty much disappeared. We used to get some occasional cryptic email. Like whenever we referenced her, I wouldn't be surprised if she writes back after this show. But we haven't heard from her in about, 15 years, I guess. Wow. Boy, that's a good memory to be able to harken back to.
Well, she was one of the first kind of external personalities on the show. So, yeah.
Other guests, frequent guests, Kathy Wass. She was a guest and a co-host for a few years. She's running one of the public libraries back in Tampa Bay, I think.
Nice.
I saw that on Facebook the other day. Stephanie Hayes was a frequent guest and occasional co-host. She's a columnist now for the Tampa Bay Times. I think her column has some name like Stefanitely.
That's cute.
It's some. I don't read it.
It's memorable.
Chase Squires.
Chase, our boy Chase.
He was a frequent guest host in the early days. He was there for the Miami Vice show and a couple others. He's semi-retired and he lives in Ecuador now. We hear from him quite a bit. He shows up at the monthly Zoom happy hour parties with our patrons.
Yeah, Chase is living the expat life. He's got it all dialed in down there, it seems like.
You met him, right? You met him in Vegas?
I did, yes. One of my fondest memories is of him passed out on the beach at the concert.
He wilted like the wicked, just like, what a world.
Yeah, like there's a linen suit over there on the sand. Oh, Chase is in it.
Jeff in Cuba, our Navy friend from Gitmo in Cuba, he retired from the Navy. He has a civilian job. I think it's in Virginia.
Yeah, you might have heard his voice if you listened to the last episode.
Yeah, that's right. He was on the last episode. And we're hoping he does more contributions. Jen with one N, we haven't heard from her in a while. She still lives in the tippy top of the northeast section of the U.S. I saw her last year in person. Me and the wife, we saw her.
Oh, that's right.
We were up there and we stopped by and had lunch with her. We still hear from her often. We just haven't had time to have her on
we have email with her. I email with her now and then.
Yeah, it's hard to coordinate times to record these days because we're all so scattered. So
both physically and brain.
So I think those are the major ones. Anyway, hey, we love your PPTMNs. Feel free to send them to us any topic. Just remember to put PPTMN in the subject line. Email address podcast@sit80s.com.
For Chuck Coverly, that's letter S, letter I, letter T, number 8, number 0, letter S, punctuation mark, period, letter C, letter O, letter M. Podcast@sit80s.com.
Yeah. We'll be right back after this commercial break.
Wherever you go, sweet and low. More people you know, sweet and low.
It's part of my life. For over a generation, Sweet and Low has been helping millions of people cut calories. People who want to get more out of life.
Wow, what a cake. Sweet and low? I've been baking with it for years.
Get more out of living, you and sweet and low. Wherever you go, sweet and low. Wherever you go, sweet and low. Wherever you go.
Hey, we have a few minutes left. I wanted to say thank you to our patrons. As you know, the podcast is listener supported through Patreon. And you're able to join for, I think the minimum is $2 a month. And for $2 a month, you support the podcast. You get invited to the monthly Zoom happy hours. We're starting to do patron-only podcasts. I think we have two episodes are done.
Yep. And we blog there some. There's some additional content that you get as a supporter of the show.
So it's a lot of fun. We have 3 new patrons to talk about. Special thanks to Brian Patton, Proto Man, and Gerald Shivers. I hope I got that right. So, reminder, Diane Franklin mentioned her social media accounts. You can find her on Twitter. She's at Diane Franklin 80. She's actress Diane Franklin on Instagram. And I think you can find her official page on Facebook. I think it's Diane Franklin 556.
Nice.
So, hope you enjoyed our chat with Diane. Definitely check out her book. Go back, rewatch some of those movies that she did in the 80s. They're classics all. And remember, come back and join us again next week because Brad and I are here, hopelessly stuck in the 80s.
Oh, we could break through it if we could just get to it just once.
Stuck in the 80s is now on Patreon. If you'd like to support the show, go to patreon.com/stuckintheeighties podcast. Special thanks to Check Battery Daily for our theme music, and thanks for listening.